The night was cruelly cold, the kind of biting cold that didn't just settle on your skin but crawled into your bones and made your teeth ache. I had been driving back from the hardware store, more concerned with the broken gate hinge in my backyard than anything else, when something caught my eye beneath the underpass by the river. At first it looked like nothing more than a mound of discarded clothes or an old blanket tossed aside, but something in my chest tugged at me to slow down. My headlights cut across the concrete pillars, and I swear my heart stopped when I realized what I was really looking at. There, pressed against the wall, was a young woman curled protectively around a bundle in her arms. Her hair was matted, her clothes threadbare, and though she was wrapped in a thin blanket, I could see her shoulders trembling against the November air. I might have thought it just another tragic story of the city's forgotten if she hadn't lifted her head right then, squinting against the light. And when her face came into view, pale and gaunt and yet so achingly familiar, I gasped out loud. Emily? The name left my lips before I could stop it. My voice cracked like old wood splitting. Her eyes widened, glassy with exhaustion, and for a second I thought she might collapse back into the shadows, convinced she was hallucinating. Her lips moved, trembling, and then a sound escaped. Grandpa? The world tilted on its axis. I had not seen my granddaughter in years, not since arguments and silences had driven rifts through our family that none of us had managed to heal. Last I had heard, she was in college, chasing dreams. And now here she was, under a bridge in the dead of night, clutching something in her arms. I stepped closer, every breath tight in my chest. The blanket shifted and revealed the truth. A baby. Tiny, fragile, face half hidden against her chest. My knees nearly buckled at the sight. My God, I whispered. Emily, what happened? The words barely left me before she broke. Her entire body shook with sobs, the kind that had been held in for far too long. I didn't ask another question. Instead, I dropped to my knees in the damp concrete, stripping off my coat and wrapping it around her and the child. The baby stirred with a soft whimper, and the sound tore through me worse than any scream. Come on, I said gently but firmly, helping her to her feet. You're not staying here another minute. She clung to the baby with one arm and to me with the other, her legs weak from exhaustion, but I guided her carefully to the truck. I settled her inside, turned the heater up as far as it would go, and pulled out onto the empty street. For a long while the only sounds were the hum of the engine, the rush of cold air trying to seep through the doors, and the faint cries of the baby. I wanted to ask her everything: where was her mother, what had happened, why hadn't anyone told me, but I bit my tongue. There would be time for that. Right now all that mattered was warmth, food, safety. She kept glancing sideways at me, as if afraid I would vanish, as if I were only a dream conjured by the night. Her face was thinner than I remembered, her cheeks hollowed, but her eyes were still Emily's, though dulled with exhaustion and grief. When we pulled into my driveway, she gasped softly. You still live here? Yes, I said simply. This house never stopped being home. Inside, I led her to the living room and eased her onto the couch. The baby, a boy, I realized now, whimpered again, and she rocked him gently, humming something faint under her breath. I fetched blankets from the linen closet, tucking them around both mother and child, then hurried to the kitchen. My hands shook as I filled the kettle, the weight of what I'd just seen crashing into me all at once. When I brought her a mug of tea, she took it with trembling fingers. I sat down beside her, my voice barely above a whisper. What's his name? She looked down at the baby, her lips trembling, and then said softly, Ethan. The name hit me like a blow and a blessing all at once. Ethan. A new life, innocent, undeserving of the hardship already written into his story. He's beautiful, I said, and I meant it. Absolutely beautiful. Her eyes filled with tears again. I didn't know where else to go, she whispered. I thought no one wanted me anymore. Her words shattered me. For all the mistakes I had made in life, for all the silence that had stretched between me and my daughter Claire, Emily's mother, I had never stopped loving my granddaughter. And now, to hear that she truly believed she was unwanted. I reached out and took her hand, covering it with mine. Emily, listen to me. You will never be unwanted here. You and Ethan, you'll always have a home with me. Always. She broke again, sobbing, but this time she didn't try to hide it. She leaned into me, and I wrapped my arm around her, holding her as she shook. The baby stirred but didn't wake fully, only pressed his small fist against his mother's chest. That night, after she had fallen asleep curled on the couch with Ethan nestled safely in her arms, I sat in my chair and watched them, my heart heavy but burning with determination. Fate had not brought her back to me by accident. This was more than coincidence. And deep inside, I knew something else too, it was time. Because I carried my own secret, one I had buried for decades. A truth that, if revealed, would change everything Emily thought she knew about her family. A truth that explained why her mother, my daughter, had turned so cold. A truth that I had never wanted to face, until now. As the clock ticked steadily in the quiet room, I whispered to myself, tomorrow, I'll tell her everything. Morning sunlight crept through the curtains like hesitant fingers, casting a pale glow across the living room. I had dozed off in my armchair, but the soft sound of movement stirred me awake. Emily sat on the couch, her hair tangled, her eyes heavy but watchful as she cradled Ethan, who rooted against her, searching. She looked up when she saw me, her lips twitching into something between gratitude and shame. You didn't have to stay awake all night, she said softly. I couldn't have slept if I tried, I admitted, stretching the stiffness out of my shoulders. You two are safe now. That's all that matters. She nodded, her eyes dropping back to Ethan as she guided him, whispering words I couldn't hear. I busied myself in the kitchen, frying eggs, toasting bread, brewing fresh coffee. By the time I set the plates down, she had settled Ethan back into the nest of blankets beside her. She ate slowly, as though she hadn't tasted a proper meal in weeks, which I suspected was true. When her plate was nearly empty, she set her fork down, her fingers trembling. I could see the war inside her, the battle between silence and confession, and finally the dam gave way. Grandpa, she whispered, her voice hoarse. I don't even know where to start. Start where it hurts the most, I said gently. We'll get through the rest together. Her eyes filled with tears, and she drew in a shaky breath. Mom told me she didn't want me anymore. The words fell like stones into a still pond, rippling through the room, striking something deep in me. I clenched my jaw, forcing calm. Tell me, I said. She wanted me to end the pregnancy, Emily whispered, her voice breaking. She said I was ruining my life, ruining hers too. She said no decent man would ever want me if I went through with it. That I'd be chained forever to a mistake. When I refused, she screamed that I wasn't her daughter anymore. She told me to pack my things. She slammed the door when I begged her not to. Tears streamed down her face now, and her hands clenched in her lap. I thought maybe she'd calm down, maybe she'd call me. But weeks went by. Nothing. I tried calling her once, after Ethan was born. She hung up. She wouldn't even hear my voice. My chest burned with fury and sorrow, my heart breaking for the girl before me. Claire, my daughter, my flesh and blood, had said those things. Had abandoned her own child, her own grandchild. But the anger I felt toward Claire was twisted with guilt, because I knew some of her hardness had been shaped by me, by my silence, by the choices I had made long ago. What about Ethan's father? I asked quietly, though I feared the answer. Emily's expression darkened. His name was Daniel. At first he was sweet, kind, or maybe I just wanted to believe he was. When I told him I was pregnant, he pretended to support me. But when the months dragged on, when money grew tighter, when my belly got bigger, he changed. He stopped coming home at night. He told me he wasn't ready to be a dad. And then, when Ethan was only 2 weeks old, he left for good. He took what little money we had left. I never saw him again. Her voice cracked, and she hugged her arms around herself as if holding in the shards of her own heart. I tried, Grandpa. I really did. I applied for jobs, begged for help, but no one wanted a girl with a baby. Rent piled up, the landlord stopped being patient, and one morning I came home from another failed interview to find my things on the sidewalk. Ethan crying in my arms. Nowhere to go. I walked for hours, praying for a miracle. But the only place I found was that bridge. I swallowed hard, fighting back my own tears. The image of her wandering those streets with a newborn carved itself into my soul like a scar I would never erase. Emily, I said, reaching across the table to grip her hand. You didn't deserve any of that. Neither of you did. And you will never go through it again. Not while I'm here. Her lips trembled, and she squeezed my hand, her voice breaking on a whisper. I thought maybe you hated me too. That's why I didn't call you. Mom always said you were disappointed in her, and I thought, maybe you'd feel the same about me. Her words stabbed me deeper than any knife. Because there was truth in them, not that I hated her, God no, but that I had been disappointed in her mother, Claire, and I had let that disappointment fester into distance, silence, estrangement. And in doing so, I had let Emily believe she was unwanted, unloved. I could never hate you, I said firmly, tears spilling now. Not in 1,000 lifetimes. You are my granddaughter, Emily. You are a piece of my heart walking around in the world. And Ethan, I glanced at the baby, stirring gently in his blanket, he is a blessing. Don't you ever let anyone make you believe otherwise. She broke then, fully, collapsing into sobs as she pressed her forehead to the table. I rose and came around, wrapping her in my arms as she shook. And as I held her, my mind raced. Because if Claire had been capable of such cruelty, it was not just her fault. The roots of her coldness stretched deeper, into the past I had never spoken of, the mistakes I had buried. As the day wore on, I busied myself with the small things, finding clean clothes for Emily, washing the baby's worn blanket, setting up the spare bedroom with a crib I had stored away from years ago. Emily watched me in quiet awe, as if she couldn't believe someone would do these things for her. Each time our eyes met, I felt the weight of my silence grow heavier. That night, after Ethan was finally asleep and Emily sat beside me on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, the air cool but gentle, she turned to me. Her eyes were swollen, her cheeks raw from tears, but there was something else there now, a flicker of strength. Grandpa, she whispered. Why do you think Mom is like that? Why does she hate me so much? I hesitated, the truth burning on my tongue. Because I knew the answer. Because I had carried the reason for years. Because the secret I had buried was the key to all of this. I looked out into the night, the stars scattered faintly across the sky, and I whispered, because, Emily, there's something I never told you. Something I never told your mother either. And maybe it's time you finally knew. She looked at me, her breath catching, her eyes wide. And I knew then, tomorrow, I would reveal it all. The following weeks unfolded like a slow dawn after a stormy night. Emily had settled into my home with little Ethan, and though the house was now filled with the cries, coos, and giggles of a baby, I couldn't shake off the shadows that lingered in Emily's eyes. She was grateful, polite, and gentle, but beneath her soft words and faint smiles, I sensed a weight pressing her down, a silence that begged to be broken. I didn't want to force her, she had been through enough, but one evening, after Ethan had finally fallen asleep in the crib I had set up for him, Emily sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of tea. She stared into the steam as though it might carry away her thoughts. Finally, she spoke in a trembling voice. Grandpa, she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, I don't even know where to start. Everything feels so broken. I leaned forward, placing my weathered hands gently on hers. Start wherever your heart tells you to, Emily. I'm here to listen. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. She took a shaky breath, her lips quivering before she forced the words out. It started with Mom. You know she's always been distant. Cold. When I was little, I thought she just worked too much, that she didn't have time for me. But as I grew older, I realized it wasn't about work. It was about me. She never wanted me. Not really. She told me once, during a fight, that I ruined her life, that if it wasn't for me, she could have done so much more. Her voice cracked, and she pressed the back of her hand to her eyes, trying to hold back tears. My chest tightened. I had suspected Claire wasn't the warmest mother, but I never imagined she could wound her daughter with words so cruel. Emily continued, when I got pregnant, it was like her worst fears came true. She told me I had become her, just another failure who ruined her life with a baby she didn't want. She kicked me out the night I told her. She said I had a choice, abortion or leave her house forever. And Grandpa, her shoulders shook as she whispered, I couldn't give up Ethan. I couldn't kill my baby. So she threw me out with nothing but a bag of clothes. I stayed with friends for a while, but eventually, I was on the streets. I reached across the table and held her trembling hands tightly, fighting back my own tears. The pain in her words pierced me like shards of glass. Emily, I said softly, you made the bravest choice a mother can make. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. She gave me a weak smile, but her eyes still carried a storm. After a long silence, she went on. Ethan's father, at first, I thought he was my way out. His name's Ryan. We met at college. He was charming, funny, and he made me feel seen in a way Mum never did. But when I told him I was pregnant, everything changed. He panicked. He told me he wasn't ready to be a father, that I should deal with it. I begged him to stay, but he stopped answering my calls. A month later, I heard he'd moved in with another girl. Her voice hardened with bitterness. He didn't want me. He didn't want Ethan. He just vanished. I clenched my fists under the table, anger simmering in my veins. How could a man abandon his own child so easily? How could my own daughter, the woman who had once been my little girl, do the same to her daughter? It felt like a generational curse of abandonment, a cycle of wounds passed down like a poisoned heirloom. Emily, I said firmly, you're not your mother. You're not Ryan. You're better than both of them. You chose love when it cost you everything. That's what makes you strong. She lowered her head, tears sliding down her cheeks as she whispered, then why do I feel so weak, Grandpa? Why does it feel like I failed Ethan before he even had a chance? I stood, walked around the table, and pulled her into my arms. She clung to me like a child, sobbing into my shoulder as I stroked her hair. You didn't fail him, I murmured. You gave him life. And now you're giving him love. That's more than your mother ever gave you. You're breaking the cycle, Emily. You just don't see it yet. The days after that conversation felt different. Emily slowly began to open up more, sharing fragments of her story whenever she found the strength. Sometimes it came in bursts of anger, other times in waves of sorrow, but always with an honesty that tore at my heart. I listened without judgment, without interruption, offering only the comfort of my presence and the assurance that she was no longer alone. One morning, while I fed Ethan mashed bananas in his high chair, Emily leaned against the doorway, watching us with a soft smile. He loves you, you know, she said quietly. He doesn't smile like that for anyone else. I chuckled, wiping a smear of banana from Ethan's cheek. Well, I suppose he knows he's got me wrapped around his tiny little finger. Emily laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in far too long, and for a fleeting moment, the weight lifted from her shoulders. But shadows lingered still. I noticed how she flinched whenever someone mentioned her mother, how her eyes darkened whenever she spoke of Ryan. There was more to her pain, layers she hadn't yet revealed. And I knew, deep down, that I carried my own truths I had hidden from her, truths about her mother, about mistakes I had made long before Emily was born. One night, after Emily had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room, staring at an old photograph on the mantelpiece. It was of Claire when she was about Emily's age, smiling brightly with her arms around me. Back then, I thought we were unbreakable, that no matter what, I could protect her. But I hadn't. I had failed her, just as she later failed Emily. And now, as I looked at Ethan sleeping peacefully in the crib beside me, I knew the time was coming when I would have to tell Emily the truth about Claire, about me, about why our family had fallen apart. For now, though, I kept that secret close to my chest. Emily wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. She needed healing first. She needed strength. And as I watched her tiptoe into the room to check on Ethan, brushing a kiss against her son's forehead, I knew that strength was growing inside her, piece by piece, day by day. But the past has a way of clawing its way into the present, and the truth I had buried for decades was stirring again, demanding to be revealed. The silence in my house had changed. It was no longer heavy with loneliness but alive with the rhythm of a baby's cries, Emily's soft lullabies, and the gentle thud of footsteps across the wooden floors. Yet beneath this fragile new warmth, there lingered an unease, like a storm gathering far out at sea. Emily was healing, yes, but her scars ran deep, and I knew my own secrets still sat like landmines between us. Secrets about her mother. About me. About the mistakes I had buried in silence. It was on a rainy afternoon that the past began clawing its way back. Emily and I were sorting through the attic, trying to find warmer clothes for Ethan as the season shifted. The air was thick with dust, and boxes of forgotten years crowded the dim space. Emily opened one marked Claire, School Years. Inside were old photographs, report cards, and yellowed letters. She pulled one out, squinting at the faded ink. "Grandpa," she said slowly, "why do these letters say Mom lived with Grandma until she was 13? I thought you and Grandma divorced when she was little, and she lived with you most of the time." Her voice was calm, but I could hear the tremor beneath. My heart clenched. The lies I had let linger for decades suddenly cornered me in that attic. I swallowed hard. "It's complicated, Emily." She turned to me, eyes sharp. "Complicated, or something you never wanted me to know?" I sat down heavily on an old trunk, the weight of years pressing on my shoulders. "Both," I admitted. She sat across from me, holding Ethan on her lap as if to shield him from whatever truth I might unleash. "Then tell me. Please. I've lived my whole life not understanding why Mum is the way she is. Why she hates me. Why she's so cold. Maybe if I knew," her voice cracked. "Maybe if I knew, I wouldn't feel so broken." The words pierced me. I had spent years pretending silence could protect her, but all it had done was leave her lost in the dark. I rubbed my face with trembling hands before beginning. "Your mother wasn't always like this, Emily. She was once a bright, loving girl. But life hardened her. And I played a part in that." Emily's eyes locked onto mine, searching. "When your grandmother and I split," I said, "Claire was only 6. I fought for custody, not because I thought I was the better parent, but because I was too proud to admit I wasn't ready to let go. The court gave me weekends, but for years Claire lived mostly with your grandmother. Your grandmother remarried when Claire was 11. Her new husband," I hesitated, bile rising in my throat. "He was not a kind man. He was strict, controlling. Sometimes worse." Emily's face paled. "What do you mean worse?" I forced myself to continue. "He made Claire feel like she was a burden. He shouted, belittled her, sometimes, he raised his hand. Your grandmother never stopped him. And my voice broke. I didn't see it in time. By the time I realized what was happening, Claire was already a teenager, already hardened. She came to live with me, but she carried that anger, that distrust, into everything. She never forgave her mother. She never forgave me for not protecting her sooner." Emily's eyes filled with tears, her lips trembling as she rocked Ethan gently, as though shielding him from the echoes of old wounds. "So all the coldness, all the cruelty, she's passing it on because that's all she ever knew?" I nodded slowly. "It doesn't excuse what she did to you, Emily. Nothing excuses that. But it explains why she became who she is. And it's my fault too. I thought loving her later would erase the pain she suffered earlier. I thought time would heal her. But the truth is, silence doesn't heal. It festers. It grows. Emily wiped her cheeks, her jaw tight. So when she told me I ruined her life, when she said she never wanted me, she wasn't talking about me at all. She was talking about herself. Her words were sharp with grief, but I could see the clarity dawning in her eyes. The puzzle pieces of her mother's cruelty were shifting into place, forming a picture that was painful, yes, but no longer senseless. For days after that, Emily moved like a ghost around the house, caught between fury and sorrow. One night, she came to me in the living room, her face pale but her eyes fierce. "Grandpa," she said, "I need to see her. I need to face her. I can't raise Ethan with this wound inside me. I need to know if she can change, or if I have to cut her out forever." The thought filled me with dread, but I knew she was right. Avoiding Claire hadn't healed anything for either of them. Perhaps it was time for confrontation. When Claire finally walked through my door, after I called her and told her she needed to come, I saw at once the walls she had built around herself. Dressed sharply as ever, her expression unreadable, she barely glanced at Emily before folding her arms. "Dad, what is this about?" she asked coolly. Emily stood, clutching Ethan to her chest. Her voice shook but carried a strength I hadn't heard before. "This is about you and me, Mum. About what you did. About what you said. You told me I ruined your life. You threw me out when I needed you most. And I need to know why." The air in the room grew heavy. Claire's eyes flickered, just for a moment, betraying something raw before the mask slipped back. "I don't owe you an explanation, Emily," she snapped. But Emily didn't back down. "Yes, you do. Because I won't let Ethan grow up thinking abandonment is normal. I won't let him inherit this pain. If you have even a shred of honesty left, then tell me the truth." Silence fell. For a long moment, Claire's facade held. But then, slowly, it cracked. Her eyes glistened, her lips trembled, and she whispered, "Because you reminded me of me. And I hated myself too much to love you." The words cut through the air like glass. Emily gasped, clutching Ethan tighter as tears streamed down her face. I stood frozen, my heart breaking for both of them. Claire collapsed onto the couch, her hands shaking. "I thought if I pushed you away, you wouldn't become me. But all I did was hurt you the way I was hurt. And I can't take it back." Emily stared at her, torn between rage and pity. "Then why didn't you try, Mum? Why didn't you break the cycle?" Claire's voice broke as she whispered, "Because I didn't know how." The room fell into silence, heavy with decades of unspoken pain. And in that silence, I knew the final part of the truth still rested with me, the part one had never told either of them. A truth that might finally break the chains holding our family captive, or shatter us beyond repair. The air after Claire's confession was thick and unsteady, as though the walls of my home had absorbed the weight of 3 generations of sorrow. Emily sat rigid, Ethan cradled against her, silent tears streaking her face. Claire stared at her own trembling hands, her mask shattered, revealing the broken woman beneath. I sat between them, my heart pounding, knowing there was one truth left, the deepest of all, the one I had guarded for decades. Without it, nothing would ever make sense. "Emily," I said softly, my voice rough with age and regret. "There's something you need to know. Something both you and your mother deserve to hear." Both women looked at me, Emily with tear-bright eyes, Claire with wariness. I took a deep breath. "Emily, you always believed your father left because he didn't want to be around. That isn't the whole truth. The truth is, I forced him away." Her eyes widened. "What? Grandpa, what are you saying?" I steadied myself. "When Claire got pregnant with you, she was terrified. She was barely out of her teens, still carrying her own scars. Your father, Michael, wanted to stay. He loved her, but he was young, reckless, with no steady job, no way to provide. I looked at him and saw the man who had failed my daughter. I thought if I pushed him out, I could protect her, protect you. I told him he wasn't good enough, that if he really loved Claire, he'd walk away and let her build a better life without him. And he did. He left because I told him to. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily's mouth fell open, her tears halting in shock. Claire's face twisted, fury and sorrow battling within her. You did what?" she whispered. I bowed my head. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was sparing you both from more pain. But all I did was steal your choice, Claire, and rob Emily of a father who might have been there if I hadn't interfered. I created the void that poisoned everything after. And I am sorry. More sorry than I can ever say. Claire's fists clenched at her sides, her eyes blazing. All these years, I thought he abandoned me. I thought I wasn't worth staying for. And you, her voice broke. You were supposed to protect me. Her words tore through me. I know. And I failed. I failed both of you. My silence, my pride, my choices, they ruined us. I can't undo it. But I can stop hiding now. Emily sat in stunned silence, holding Ethan tightly. Finally, her voice came, low and trembling. So all this time, the pain, the anger, the hate between you two, it started with a lie. With you, Grandpa. Her words cut, but they were true. I nodded. Yes. I was the root. But you, both of you, have the power to end it here. With Ethan. He doesn't have to inherit our brokenness. He can inherit love. Claire covered her face with her hands, sobbing for the first time in years, raw and unguarded. Emily, though still shaken, slowly moved closer, setting Ethan down in his crib. She sat beside her mother, hesitant, unsure, but her hand reached out, resting lightly on Claire's trembling arm. Claire gasped at the touch, looking at her daughter with eyes wide and wet. I don't know if I can forgive you, Mom, Emily whispered, her voice cracking. But I don't want to hate you anymore. I don't want Ethan to grow up watching me hate you. Claire let out a broken sob and nodded. I don't deserve forgiveness. But if you'll let me try, Emily, if you'll let me try, I'll spend the rest of my life making up for what I did. I watched, tears streaming down my old cheeks, as the fragile bridge between mother and daughter began to form, not healed, not whole, but there. A chance. In the days that followed, something remarkable happened. Claire began visiting regularly. At first, she came stiffly, awkwardly, as though afraid to hold her grandson. But Ethan, with the innocent wisdom of babies, reached for her without hesitation, giggling when she finally cradled him. Something in her melted then, and for the first time, I saw in her eyes the spark of the girl she once was. Emily remained cautious, but she no longer flinched at her mother's presence. They cooked together, awkward at first, then easier with time. At night, I often found them talking softly in the living room while Ethan slept, their voices fragile but real. One evening, Emily sat beside me on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky with fire and gold. Grandpa, she said, I don't know what the future holds for Mum and me. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust her. But, for the first time, I feel like I have a family again. And that's because of you. I shook my head, overwhelmed. No, Emily. It's because of you. You chose to love when you had every reason not to. You're the one breaking the cycle. She smiled softly, tears glistening in her eyes. Maybe we both are. That night, as I watched Emily tuck Ethan into bed and Claire linger nearby, stroking her grandson's hair, I felt a peace I hadn't known in decades. My mistakes had nearly destroyed us, but truth, raw, painful truth, had given us a second chance. And as Ethan stirred in his crib, his tiny fingers curling around his mother's hand, I knew the legacy of abandonment ended here. With him, with them, with love finally finding its way home.